So last but not least, coastal marine spatial planning. Ben?
All right. Well, since CMSP includes fisheries and marine ecology and biogeochemistry stuff, basically everything everyone else just said works for us. I'll editorialize a little bit here that our group definitely blended a little bit of sort of what CMSP has done for the process of managing the oceans and then what GIS has done for CMSP. So in this list, we focused on GIS within CMSP, but we had a lot of discussion just about what CMSP has done for the process. So our pluses, GIS facilitates a data-driven and science-based approach to making decisions, which in theory improves or increases effectiveness. So we like management to be science-based and data-driven, and GIS definitely facilitates that. It's helpful for modeling optimal solutions. So with the CMSP, you're trying to be comprehensive, but to be comprehensive, that's a lot of information you have to ingest and try to think about. So using a GIS platform that can ingest all those different types of information helps make that as rational and optimal as possible. It's easy to use for educating people about what is happening out there. So we talked about how on land you can walk out or fly above the landscape and see what's going on there. In the oceans, you don't have that ability. Someone else mentioned that earlier. So it really is a tool for making visual and real what's going on in the oceans across many different dimensions, human uses, ecology, species distribution and stuff, so they can start to learn about it. It helps with identifying gaps. So if you can't map it, then you probably need to do something about that. So using GIS to there we go. Anyway, it's useful for identifying those gaps of if you can't map it, then you probably need to know more about it. And then this last point is just that by pulling all the information into this common platform for the planning process, it means you capture that information in a reusable format so that you do it once, but then you can use it many times for different processes. So that typical planning processes in the past that were done on paper or in a room, in a meeting room, it's hard to capture and then reuse that information. So GIS really helps that repeatability. Okay, minuses. It encourages oversimplification of these complex phenomena. So by putting all this information into a really simple format, not simple format, a common format, and the process of taking sometimes imperfect data and interpolating and modeling the gaps makes it seem like we know more and can do more with information than we may actually be able to, and communicating that to the public or decision makers often may not work. Sort of related is there's a false sense of precision because people perceive that if you can map it, you must know everything about it, and the uncertainty, the error bars, the interpolation, all these processes that we go through to produce the spatial information about these the various issues that are going into CMSP is often difficult to communicate and capture. There's sort of data everywhere, like it was called Portapalooza, but you got all these different sources of data being compiled and served for the process of CMSP, and it's kind of overwhelming, and it's hard to know which ones to go to and what to use for your particular purpose. Some data, actually a lot of data, can be difficult to map, and so if you can't map it, it's hard to include, but it might be really important for your decision-making processes. So using a GIS approach for CMSP biases the type of things that you can consider. And because CMSP is trying to be broad and comprehensive, this isn't specific necessarily to GIS within CMSP, but it's clearly related, that you can have just this sensory or information overload when people are trying to think through a planning process. People often need more simple comparisons like yes or no or this or that. And if you've got all this different kind of information flooding you, it can be kind of overwhelming and difficult to make a decision. And then we only had 3 interesting points. I guess we're not a very interesting group. So first, data versioning, reuse, customization, multiple data set proliferation. There's just we talked a lot about how the process of compiling and pulling together all of this data for CMSP it's this Portapalooza problem as well. It's just like there's a lot of complexity in handling and dealing and curating and processing data that is going to take some interesting solutions to overcome. The second was through discussion about how we can kind of expand the type of data that can be ingested into the CMSP process, is thinking about citizen science or participatory processes that can use social media or cell phones or things like C-Sketch that get us beyond the traditional types of data that are pulled into ocean science in a way that is needed and demanded by CMSP, but currently isn't easy to do. And then finally, the NOAA representatives are really talking about how CMSP has been a real game changer for how they do business. It's focused their efforts on services, but also in delivering data, both historical and current, as a product, not just maps and outputs, because those data need to be served to other processes and to be discoverable and usable. So the use of and the focus of GIS data in CMSP has really transformed the way that they're doing business now. So, any questions or comments from the rest of my group?
On the precision, I believe, on the minus. I think we discussed a little bit about, or quite a lot about that as well, and I'm kind of curious about how much considerations when we talk about uncertainty and precisions versus the fact that we acquire the data at different time already, and how much of that factoring into your concern about precision and uncertainty.
I think it certainly was part of what people were considering. I think it was just a broader discussion about how all the different ways in which the process of using GIS data in this planning process of CMSP can create a false sense of precision. So it's uncertainty and error in the actual data that's used. It's the sort of optics of, well, if you can map it, it must be precise. That is a communication component of that precision. And then these ideas of the science we use to use limited data to create a more complete understanding through interpolation and other methodologies that from a scientific perspective might be completely robust, but can create a false sense of precision to people. So I think there were a lot of dimensions to the point we were making there. All right, it's time for drinks and refreshment, I think, huh?